of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. We begin with a meeting of the Public Works and Safety Standing Committee. This will be followed by the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee.
Public comment is welcome, and anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion.
I don't think these.
I'm not sure whether our microphones are on. That one's on.
Oh, this one's on.
You want to trade her until you fix it?
Yeah, that'd be perfect. You don't hear me.
And mine sounds like it's on, but it's just very, very quiet.
Hello?
Yep. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We will start over. I will now call the meeting of Public Works and Safety to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome, and anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments, and we would ask that you come forward to the microphone and be recognized. And for accurate recording purposes, we ask that you speak directly into a microphone. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call: Bryant,
Here.
Philbrook,
Here.
Markley,
Here.
Kane, and we do have communication that Commissioner Kane will be absent. Johnson,
Here.
Bynum.
Here. We have a blue sheet distributed this evening, and under our committee agenda, item 3, the proposed revisions to the HR guide have been provided. And then we have addition of item 5 regarding 2016 mowing. Next, we have the approval of our minutes from July 25.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. We have tonight, our next item is measurable goals, and last month we had a list of those come in our packets, and I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant County Administrators, Joe Connor and Mr. Gordon Criswell, and we'll hear your presentations.
Are you doing these or me? So I think in your packet, commissioners, are the various departments that will, you guys will be reviewing. I think these departments have been before you in the past, and you had some questions and recommendations for staff. So we want to just make sure we've answered all of your questions before we revisit them with more measurables around the goals. And Joe's got a piece.
I just wanted to add too, this is in planning for our strategic planning workshop November 5th. And so this is a format we kind of came up with to try to tie it all together. Like it, you don't like it. There's other things we could do it differently or however you'd like to do it, but we'd like to have some feedback from you on kind of what we've compiled and how it's formatted so we can have a really good discussion with the consultant leading the way for us on November 5th. So that was and again, the ones that we've added or listed here are the ones that have been before this committee throughout the year. So again, this is just a compilation of all the different pieces. So
Thank you. I am struggling with my technology and cannot find, I looked at this packet earlier, and now I see all of the emergency management stuff. Thank you. So the goals for Public Works and Safety then include community corrections, I think juvenile. Can you say them for me? I cannot get to this section of my,
Would you like me to state which ones are?
yes, please.
Okay, so the community corrections, emergency management, fire,
Got it.
parks and recreation, police, public works, and there's the public works, and then parks and recreation combined, that's the mowing program. The sheriff, and then we've got commission priorities that are from previous goals that we'd already had submitted.
Okay, I found it finally, Mr. Connor, I'm sorry. So what you're asking tonight is, are there additional questions or concerns from us?
Or just some general feedback about what's been presented. Is this kind of the way, the direction you'd like us to go? Is it too much detail? Is it too little detail? Again, as we get ready for next, well, a little bit more than next month, but just the first part of November, just kind of what the feedback is, from what we've presented so far.
Okay, Commissioner Markley.
Okay, so I'll just, again, this is just general feedback. I didn't have any intention of reading through every goal tonight and talking about each goal individually. So I like the way we've been having departments come and present to us, and that was sort of new from the last round of strategic planning to this round. I like that. I think it's good to have that interaction with each department as they come before us. I think it's good for us to see how the goals the departments are developing are linking up to our overall goals. And they were good. They were relatively short presentations, but I felt like it gave us just enough detail to know more about what the department's doing and how that links up with what we're doing. So I really appreciated that, and I would like to see that continue in our standing committees going forward. This format you presented, I think, is nice. It's just an easy way to sort of organize what we've been doing. I think it's just, for me, I felt like it was just the right amount of detail for us to be able to glance at it and know sort of what's going on and whose committee that falls under. My only question would be, is it as useful to staff, and is it helping you in some way? If there's anything that would make it more useful to staff, I'd be happy to see that as well, because you guys are the ones that interact with this more often than we do. And then my final comment, and this is something that I shared with Joe as he was putting together information about strategic planning, is that I want to see us focus on the goals in strategic planning, but on a very high level. And one thing that I'm wondering is whether, I love that the departments now have all these goals. This is something that didn't exist when I first got elected, and it's something that's sort of come out of all these sessions that we've had over the years. I wonder if we should start to develop an overall goal annually that applies to the whole organization, so that if you ask somebody on the elevator, what's the annual goal? What's the one big thing? And the reason I started thinking that way is because I started thinking about some of the most successful companies in the world and what things they do in terms of goal setting. And one thing that I noticed as I was doing a little research on that is that those really huge successful companies, what they all do is have just a couple, some do the one big thing, some have a couple of big things, but they tend to focus the whole organization on one goal annually, and then all the departments sort of support that one goal, and they have maybe a departmental goal that supports that big goal. What I think is nice about that is the sort of the unifying factor, and also the really nice ability at the end of each year to say, this was our one big thing, and look what a great job we did. And now this is going to be our big goal next year, and look at what a great job we're going to do. And I just saw that as a commonality between other super successful organizations. So not something we need to do tonight, but something that I think in strategic planning might be a good discussion point for us is, if we could accomplish one thing organization-wide in the next year, what would that be, and how would that impact all of our different departments? So, and I love that I just said all this general stuff in my committee, so then, or in your committee, so then when my committee comes up, I won't have to say anything.
Anyone else, as we look through these items, again, as we're preparing for our strategic planning? Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Joe, can you kind of tell me, as the departments are establishing their goals, what is guiding them in terms of the percentages and the numbers? Is it prior? Is it trend? Are we looking at trends from the past 2 to 3 to 5 years? Are we looking at information from other municipalities that, quote unquote, doing what we consider to be best practices? What are we utilizing to establish our benchmarks?
Yeah, so a lot of the ones that came forward from all four of the committees actually were kind of the actual kind of benchmark year.
Mm-hmm.
There were some that had, this is what we've done previously, we want to try to maintain, but a lot of it was, comprehensive, we're going through for the first time. And so I would say generally that these are kind of where we're starting with our benchmarks. Now, I think that getting into the strategic planning session and staying at a higher level, I think that some of those goals could be disseminated to us as departments. I think that's still, kind of in line with kind of Commissioner Markley's comments. But generally, I would say that a lot of it is first time. A lot of it is kind of this is where we're trying to start to measure and go from here up or down, depending on whichever way we want to go.
What caused me to come to that question was when I looked at the police and it talked about reducing complaints filed against officers by 50%, and then reverse the upward trend of complaints. And I just thought to myself, if the goal is to reverse an upward trend, that's an awful lofty goal in terms of reduction of the number of complaints. Not to say that I don't think we should or try to accomplish that. It's just from a logic standpoint, we're trying to reverse a trend, and then we're talking about reversing or reducing these complaints by 50%. I certainly hope so. Would love to see it happen. I'm just trying to understand the psychology behind how we put together the goals.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. And again, I think what you're saying is basically realistic versus lofty or achievable. And that's kind of the whole point, is make sure these are achievable. What the departments say, what they bring forward, make sure we can actually get there.
Yeah, we want to get as many wins as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else on these measurable goals? And if not, we will move on, and we will be in preparation for our November 5 strategic planning session. And I know we'll have more when we move to the next standing committee as well. So.
Great. And again, to Commissioner Markley's comments, we'd like to leave strategic planning with some overall direction, and we want to get the departments, and let's put some meat on the bones of what you guys want us to get to. And that's where you get into the benchmarks and the percentages and what's realistic. So I think that's great feedback. I think that puts us on course.
And thank you very much. This was information only, and so we do not need to take any action on this item. Under our committee agenda, we do have an item 1, revisions to County Emergency Operations Plan, Section ESF 7. And we have Mr. Matt May and good evening, Mr. Mike Hoffman with Emergency Management. So, gentlemen, I will yield the floor to you at this time.
Thank you. As we forewarned you last month, we're going to be doing this routinely. So I just wanted to bring, we'll start with ESF 7, and I've got both the redacted copies and the ones with the full set of changes. So my big question to you is, are there any questions about the changes and why? I know it's a lot to consume. Again, I'll just remind you the process is we bring together our key stakeholders, all the players that you see listed in the back that have action items that we expect them to take certain actions in certain kinds of responses. You are both welcome to question us and our lead coordinator as well. So as they've, the finance department has taken on the coordinator role, and I offer to all of you that I am going to be changing that as we go through these, trying to clarify that coordinator role and what their responsibilities are. And so we've done that in those meetings. So really my questions are back to you. You guys got any questions you'd like to field? Yep.
So as I understand this, as you're going through this and changing this, practically line by line, being
Literally.
that then you're having the folks who are coordinating with us signing off on that as we're going, or you're waiting till the end?
Absolutely. We actually do a couple things. We make a lot of changes right there during those meetings. They tend to be a little arduous because it is literally a paragraph by paragraph process. But we can solve a lot of issues right there in the room with the other partners. Somebody else can say, hey, I can help with that or whatever. We work that out. A couple of cases there have been significant enough changes that time really was of the essence. And so we chose to let them come back to us with revisions. It was strictly theirs, right? It was something that, pick on the Red Cross. Something the Red Cross was going to handle, no problem, but they wanted to revise it, and we allowed them an opportunity to get back to us. And we'll talk more about that in ESF 8. But that
Yay,
was-
yay. Thank
Yeah.
you for doing
It
that.
needs to be done.
does.
We're on a 5-year schedule, and my intention is to hold these meetings annually. So we'll continue this rotation into the foreseeable future. And that'll make sure that this document stays fresh. But I want to make sure that you folks have seen it and understand why we're making changes and if they're significant enough. And then at the end of this process, like I said, in the spring of 17, we'll bring back not only these sections that you've already looked at, but also the base plan, which is a piece we write within emergency management, and bring that all back to what I would expect you to take to full commission for final approval as the resolution requires, as I believe.
So this is the county emergency operations plan.
Yes.
How does it now, and once revised, fit into the regional? There's a regional plan.
There are regional plans, and fortunately for us, they're broken up the exact same way by these ESFs. And so we often call in these revisions to that plan. That plan is also on a revision schedule, so it's constantly a dynamic green document, if you will, that's constantly being looked at and refreshed. And so it's easier for us here to point to those documents where it's appropriate. And the best example I can give you right off the top of my head is ESF 10, which is the hazardous materials response section. They work very well together. They write their own response plan. It's a separate document in that regional construct, and we simply point to it with some detail added to it that's unique to us.
Okay. And 7 that we're on is all about the support piece.
Primarily, it's financial and resource management
Got it.
elements, but there are fingers of this that poke into other folks. So we make sure that they all have that voice, but it's really about how we're going to do resource management
Okay.
and who's going to be at the table to make those funding decisions, including yourselves.
Okay, are there other questions or comments from the committee members? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Anyone want to make a comment on this item? If not, I believe we do need a motion.
Separately for 7 and 8? Or just
Do we need to take these separately, ESF 7 and ESF 8, take them separately in motions?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so this will be a motion for revisions to ESF 7.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could I have roll call, please?
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. And that motion carries. And next, we have ESF 8.
Again,
Public Health and Medical Services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call on the motion.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. And that motion carries. And we thank you.
We
Your
thank you.
work here is done for the evening. Next item on this portion of the agenda, item 3, is updates to the Human Resources Guide. And
While staff is coming forward, I'll just introduce the
Thank you.
topic. So this is a follow-up to what was approved last month with regards to employees in concealed carry or carrying of weapons in our buildings. And so what you asked for was a change, or for us to review the rules and discipline section of the policy to make sure that there were appropriate and clear actions taken against employees that violate the policy. So I'm going to let Renee and Henry and Shakiba go through this with you. We've got, so this is on the rules and discipline policy for tonight.
okay, thank you.
So as Joe stated, we were asked to come back by this committee to make some modifications regarding our rules and discipline, which is located in the Human Resources Guide in section 7.1. Just to review a little bit, this past July, we came before you to make a modification to our violence-free workplace because of the law changes in Kansas that went into effect July 1st, allowing concealed carry. The unified government prohibits possession of any type of weapon in buildings and in the workplace. And I want to make sure and reiterate that the unified government is still going to continue with its commitment to provide a safe working environment for our employees and for the general public to do business here. This rule does not apply to any employees who must carry weapons as a condition of their employment, such as, our police officers and our sheriff deputies that would be exempt from this provision here. Once we passed the 6.2 HRG policy for the violence-free workplace, we then immediately sent notification to unified government employees advising them of the new changes in the law and the changes in the policy for 6.2. We also required department heads to meet with all of their staff in regards to these changes because we wanted to ensure that staff was aware of what policy changes we had here. And we asked every department head to receive an acknowledgement from each of their staff members that they were aware that these policy changes existed. Today, we have about 80% of the departments that have complied with that acknowledgement. We're still working on about 20% and trying to collect those. Some of the reasoning for that is because people have been out probably on extended leave, so those are some stragglers that are coming in. So again, just as a reminder, all unified government buildings are exempt from the 2013 law, no guns concealed or open by anyone in UG buildings. And our exemption does expire July of 2017, at which time we're going to have to revisit again these policies for a second time. Changes to the violence-free workplace policy, as a reminder, it prohibits the following acts, which was physical or verbal reference that an employee is carrying a weapon, display of a weapon, open carry is prohibited, failure of an employee to keep a gun in his or her immediate possession and control, unlawful use of a handgun in the workplace, and possession by any employee who is not legally qualified to carry a weapon. So that takes us to the revisions of the rules and discipline in 7.1. Here I just wanted to highlight the actual rule violations that are specific to the concealed carry. We did take the time to actually review and make several modifications to this policy as you have in front of you. We tried to redline everything that we had as far as any changes that we would have had. Many of the changes may be just changes that we were trying to mirror what we were actually practicing because this policy had not been revised since 2005. But just to bring you back to the actual rule violations that are specific to the concealed carry, and these are specifically the ones that you asked us to come back and put some discipline onto. Possession of a weapon in a unified government building. We left the penalty to be determined by the circumstance. Just for clarification again, all unified government buildings are exempt from the law, and until then, no guns are allowed in any of our buildings. So with that, depending on if a situation occurs, this allows us the flexibility to really vet out what the situation is before imposing discipline on the employee. Failing to keep a handgun carried by an employee concealed or in one's possession at all times, we felt that if this happened, maybe the first time, we would issue a written warning. The first occasion, a written warning is actually, in our level of progression, it is like the second level. So the first would be a verbal, but because of the severity of this violation, we felt that the first violation should be at least a written warning and then move to a suspension and a termination. Any physical or verbal reference that an employee is in possession of a weapon or any display of a weapon, again, that is a written warning, a suspension, and a termination. Openly carrying a firearm while conducting UG business. Again, we followed the same progression of a written warning, suspension, and termination. And then unlawful discharge of a handgun. On that one, we are going to move for termination, because if for whatever reason that someone did discharge their handgun, if it was lawful, they would be going through the procedures through the courts to justify if the discharge of that weapon was within those constraints. We also wanted to consider if it was accidental, if someone was just sitting there and their weapon went off. You know, we needed to be able to address, but we wanted to take a stance that any discharge would be termination of employment. Possession of a weapon that the employee is not legally qualified to carry, that is going to be immediate termination as well. Because if you are not legally qualified to carry a weapon, you should not be carrying that weapon. And then failing to notify a supervisor of another employee's violation of the violence-free workplace policy. We took that as the penalty to be determined by the circumstance. We wanted to make sure that employees understood that we are very serious about this policy. And any knowledge, if you know that another employee is violating this policy, employees have an obligation to report.
I'm just going to interrupt here for a second because I don't think that slide is accurate. We've been changing this back and forth so many times that I'm not sure all of the revisions got into, well, I know they didn't get into this slide, and what you have in front of you in terms of the policy is not what that slide is shown on that slide, yes. So let me go through what I think we finally determined should be the penalties for these things. First one, possession of a weapon, that is correct. Penalty is to be determined by the circumstances. Our thinking there was that it's possible that an employee could accidentally bring a gun into the workplace. That would merit a different penalty than somebody who consciously and deliberately brought one in violation of the policy. Failing to keep the employee's handgun concealed or in his or her possession at all times, also that is correct. It's first a written warning, then a suspension, and then a termination. The next two, however, are not correct. For any physical or verbal reference that an employee is in possession of a weapon or display of a weapon, our recommendation is that there be a suspension the first time and termination the second time. So it's stronger than what's reflected on that slide. And then openly carrying a firearm while conducting UG business, again, our recommendation would be a suspension for the first offense, termination for the second offense, so it is stricter than what's shown on that slide. And then the other two would be unlawful discharge of a handgun or possessing a weapon that the employee is not legally qualified to carry. I think any discharge of a handgun is a very serious matter, whether it's accidental or intentional, and we felt that termination was warranted in that situation. Possession of a weapon that the employee is not legally qualified to carry, that's usually with regard to someone who's been convicted of a felony or has some other disqualification. That's almost certainly knowing, and that should also be a termination offense.
I have a question.
So the unlawful discharge of handgun, I just want to understand, you are going to terminate someone for the unlawful discharge of a handgun?
Yes.
Not for just the discharge of a handgun. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
I know, I'm just trying to make sure, because sometimes people try to get rid of the unlawful part and just see discharge. And so as she was saying earlier, you referenced the fact that the normal things that would happen, it would be going through the police department and or the DA's office for a discharge of a handgun, and they would be looking that over and determining if it was lawful or unlawful. Is that correct?
That could be in some situations, yes. I would think, my view would be that almost any discharge of a firearm is going to be unlawful. There are only certain places where a firearm can be discharged lawfully. Now, there may be circumstances where in self-defense or whatever, the discharge of a firearm would be found to be legal or lawful, but by and large, no.
And we do have a city ordinance that prohibits the discharge of a firearm.
I know.
All right. And then the last one, 18, that is correct, as far as failing to notify a supervisor.
Well, I'm glad to hear that two of those were not correct as shown, because as we were going through them, I was not agreeing. And so suspension and termination, openly carrying a firearm while conducting UG business was one of them that was really standing out for me. I'm fine with it as stated correctly. Yes, Mr. Bryant.
Just for clarification, the same subject of the unlawful discharge, is that only during their working hours? Or would that include like on their weekend? I have no idea what,
This would be in connection with their work.
which
Yes.
is work.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Can you remind me again, I might have been having a senior moment. The first one, possession of a weapon, why the discipline is the penalty to be determined. Is there a rationale? Tell me again why that is. As opposed to suspension and then termination.
I think the main thought that we had on there is that it's possible that an employee could inadvertently carry a weapon into the building. And that penalty ought to be different than a penalty for someone who actually knowingly brings their weapon into the building. So that's the primary reason, I think, penalty to be determined by the circumstances.
Someone could inadvertently bring a firearm into the building.
I think that's certainly possible for somebody who has one in their purse, doesn't realize it's in there. It's possible.
So,
Still a serious matter, but
Yeah.
the penalty could be different, depending upon whether there's actually some intent to it.
so if somebody they're not really on the job, but they're coming here to maybe talk to the HR person or whatever, okay? And they normally do conceal carry. And they're not thinking about it. They're just like rushing around, and they zoom in and they've got their gun. That would be the situation on something like that. I know people go, how can you forget you have your gun? Well, if you carry one all the time, it just becomes part of you and you don't think about it as much. The other thing is that am I going to want to leave my gun sitting in my car outside in the parking lot? That's why people conceal carry. So, which is one reason why I'm not conceal carrying right now, because I don't want to have to deal with all the ramifications of that, other than away from here. So,
The testing on whether someone is inadvertently carrying a weapon into the building, how do you measure that? How does one know? How is one able to ascertain whether they knew or didn't know?
Well, there would undoubtedly be an investigation conducted, and ultimately I think it comes down to a credibility determination by Human Resources or the administrator. But there would have a heavy burden, I think, to show that it was in fact just a slip of the mind rather than an intentional, deliberate violation of policy.
Commissioner Markley.
Yeah, I was going to hit on the exact same issue as Commissioner Johnson. I guess my opinion is I understand someone could accidentally bring their gun in. I get that. But for me, that violation is no less severe because it was an accident, because the bottom line is they brought a gun into the building, and that the responsibility of the gun owner still rests with the gun owner. And my concern all along has been that the other people in our building still feel safe. So I'm less concerned with the rights of the gun owner, who's the one who violated our rule, than I am with the rights of the people in our building to feel safe. So I guess if it were me, I would say written warning, suspension, termination for possession of a weapon in the UG building regardless, because I feel the same way as Commissioner Johnson in that, especially if they know there's flexibility, of course everyone's going to say, I brought it by accident. They're not going to say, oh yeah, I intentionally brought my gun in to show it to somebody. You're always going to get the same answer, which is that, yeah, of course it was accidental. I brought my gun in by accident, because they know it's a violation to bring the gun on the premises. And I would point out, just for purposes of the public listening or those who just maybe haven't thought of it this way, Obviously, this building, it would be very difficult to accidentally bring a gun into because you have to pass through security, but this applies to all of our unified government facilities, and we have facilities throughout the community that do not have security desks or metal detectors, and those are the ones that would be of greater concern because people are going in and out of them more often and without security checking them.
Let me just respond to that this way. My understanding is that you would prefer it to be a written warning, a suspension, and then a termination. Is that what I think the penalty as it's put in is actually more strict than
If
that.
it's used,
Well, I think the intent of the penalty is that if they intentionally bring a weapon into the building, it's going to be a suspension or a termination, period. The only time that we would ever consider not doing that, in my opinion, would be if it was clear that this was inadvertent and there was plenty of evidence. So I don't think a written warning, somebody who intentionally brings a gun into the building deserves something harsher than a written warning. And that would be my understanding of how this is supposed to function.
So who is making that determination, I guess, is my next question. Is it always coming to your office? Because my concern is that when we leave wiggle room, different departments may treat things differently. The guys who are out in the field doing our public works, patching our streets and those sorts of things, they might come in with a gun and their supervisor might say, oh, it was just an accident, no big deal. Where if it happened in one of our buildings that has a little stricter requirements and maybe more people working there, they might get a different treatment, and I don't want there to be enough wiggle room where every employee is treated differently.
Well, my understanding is that under the violence in the workplace policy, Human Resources has to be notified of a violation of that policy. So it would come through Human Resources, likely would come through legal. I would not expect it to be done on the immediate supervisor level. It's too serious a matter to be dealt with there.
Okay.
So ultimately, it's probably going to be a recommendation from Human Resources, probably one that's reviewed by legal, and ultimately it'll go to the county administrator to make the decision as to what's appropriate in that circumstance.
I'm okay with it, with that understanding that it's not going to be made at the departmental level.
And at the beginning of the policy, just to confirm that, we actually, in this revised policy, if you turn to page 2 of the policy, we actually spelled that out to make sure that departments knew that any violations of the policy were going to be coming through Human Resources, and then we would be consulting with legal, and the final authority for termination is going to lie solely with the county administrator.
Okay.
Anything else on this item? Does any member of the public wish to speak on this item? This is an action item, and I believe we will vote, and I believe that vote will mean that we are then moving this forward to full commission?
Correct.
Okay, so,
I move that we move it forward with the intended corrections as given to us.
so
Yeah.
this is
Just
correct.
regarding the PowerPoint.
Yes, you do
Okay.
have the corrected copy, it's
Okay.
just that we didn't change the PowerPoint.
Okay.
presentation. Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. All right, a motion and a second. May I have roll call, please?
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye, and that motion carries. And thank you very much for the work. I know that was a lot of work to revise that policy, and we'll see you next year doing the same thing again, probably. The next item is number 4. This carried over from last month's meeting. You remember we had a fairly healthy discussion about our block party permit policy, and so we made revisions to that based on our discussion. And we have Ms. Brown here to share with us the revisions and updated version of the policy so that we can also, if we so choose, move that forward.
That's correct, Commissioner. Last month, after reviewing the policy, our draft policy, there was roughly 4 suggestions that we were asked to go back and change. One in Section 7, we went back and clarified the deposits and fees, and to make it very clear that you would start with a $150 permit application, 30 would be for the application fee, there would be 50 for the drop-off and retrieval of the barricades, And then the 70 would be for a security deposit, and the conditions for getting that deposit back would be the barricades are in good condition and that all trash and litter is picked up from the party. We've made it very clear that Public Works would be delivering and picking up the barricades to ensure that they remained intact, and also to give staff a chance to review the area to make sure that it was in fact cleaned up. We've added another section stating that everyone agrees they would comply with the laws with a specific notation regarding the noise there. We have ordinances that talk about noise, and so if someone did violate that, they would be guilty of those ordinances. But everyone understands if you're going to pull a block party permit, you're going to comply with all the rules. And then another section at the end, there was a request to clarify that everyone would need to clean up. And so if you don't comply with the policy, or if you have too much contact with law enforcement, you would not be able to get a permit again. And specifically, if you don't clean up your trash, that this permit would not be granted again to that applicant. If this draft meets with everyone's approval, if no other changes are sought, I did put together a small resolution adopting the policy so it could be moved on to the full commission.
I have a question as I'm looking at what's in the packet, and maybe there's something different on paper. Block party policy, and 1 is purpose, 2 is the issuance of the permit, et cetera, et cetera. And first of all, I think one of the changes, was it not the signatures of 75%? Wasn't that an increase? Signatures of 75% of the residents, so, in item 2.6. But also, number 7 is the barricades section.
Yes.
And
I think you meant to take out little I, but it's not taken out of our version.
so I just want to be crystal clear with this section. Are we saying that folks can still pick up their own barricades and return them, or no?
No, they are not.
It
I'm-
looks like the paper version has that corrected, but the electronic version we got does
Okay,
not have
so
that
I
corrected.
need to look for
Okay.
my paper
So
version.
just make sure you're using the right version.
I apologize, because I want to make sure that we're moving forward with what you've drafted. Here it is.
Yeah, and I apologize for any technology area. My version has the barricades, the option to pick it up yourself is all struck out.
Okay,
So
so
that
here
it's mandatory.
And I see here on the paper, you do spell it out clearly. Must pay $150. The UG will keep 30. The UG will also keep 50 as a fee for delivering and picking up the barricades.
Correct.
And the remaining 70 is a security. Okay, that's much better. Thank you. Okay, I'm reading the paper one now, so I'm in better shape. And you do speak to the applicants who have failed to remove decorations, trash, and debris, et cetera, will not be granted a new block party.
Correct.
Okay, so now that I'm looking at the correct version of it, to me, I don't want to cause you more work. Maybe on number 7, if that could be when we do publicize it or hand it out or anything, those specific items as they relate to money could be bolded and italicized or something.
Okay.
I think the money needs to be spelled out right up front.
What's your resolution number on this, if you want it read in?
My resolution number?
Yeah.
It-
Are they gonna give you a number later?
Yeah, no, they'll give a number depending on the order if we move it forward.
Okay, all right, so now that I'm clear on the version that we're dealing with, are there any other comments or questions on this? Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk call the roll?
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. Thank you very much, and that motion carries. I apologize. You certainly may. Would you like to come forward? You certainly may do that.
Marcia Rupp, 2816 North 46th Street. Sorry my other people aren't with me today. We had a couple sick. Somebody had a family deal, so it's me. I want to thank everybody for, taking this and, working with it and trying to make it better, because I think there was one thing that was brought up by Janet Galupski about are these just going to be block parties, or is this going to be like a birthday party or a single party, or because that was kind of a question that it should be a block party, and the purpose of the block party is to bring the neighborhood together.
Because of the item that includes 75% of the people in that area agreeing, it speaks to that somewhat.
Oh, okay.
That we wouldn't necessarily allow the street to be closed and whatnot. Obviously, we're not going to allow it if 75%
For just one family.
don't.
So it's got to be, people joining in. It can't be just one family having a private party.
I don't believe that it would allow for that.
To clarify, if 75% of the residents approved it and chose not to go to the party, it would be granted, but if,
Right.
so it could technically be for one family if all of their neighbors were okay with it.
Okay. I just wondered, we have huge backyards in our area. The other thing that I did bring up was the closing of 46th Street since 45th Street, which goes from Leavenworth Road clear through to 46th Street and 47th and down and all the way up to State Avenue, which is one of the only through streets. 47th Street's already on the list. 45th Street, you couldn't possibly have one on. It's like a roller coaster. So, about closing 46th Street. It's just way too busy. We've had police chases on there, all kinds of things. Matter of fact, we've had a couple of crime things happen, knifing there, and the police had to be out there and put up tape, and it was, I do want to say the incident that did happen on the street is going to court, and the flash drive, you can do whatever you want to with it. I let Lieutenant Colonel burn it off on his, so they have all the evidence and everything. So that will be in court, that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
In response to that?
Yes, I did speak with Ms. Rupp earlier, and I definitely understand her concern. I would advise, just per our code, that this list be kept fluid and that it's really should be the county engineer's discretion on what roads to add to it. The code speaks to the commission determining the policy, but as far as work on the roadway and the roadway itself should be something the traffic engineer and the county engineer addresses.
I'm going to agree with you. Thank you. And we have voted on this item? I believe we took roll, did we not?
Yeah.
I believe we have passed this and it will move forward for adoption by the full commission. And I also believe that's our last agenda item. It is not.
Nice try.
We tried it.
We have our Parks Director, Jeremy Rogers.
So I'll introduce this topic as well, Commissioners. This is something we added just today. We're continuing to get complaints about mowing. I'm sure that you all may be still getting complaints as well. We've had an extended season, obviously, because of the weather, and so we wanted to have Jeremy, and actually Mike Tobin is back there as well from the Public Works side, but we were talking about the lots that the parks part of it, what they do is on a lot of our vacant lots. And so Jeremy had done a little bit of research on this and come up with some options to talk about. We just want to get some feedback from this committee before we move forward.
Okay, Mr. Rogers.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening. As Joe said, I'm here to talk about the vacant lots and not the parks, so please keep that in mind. We mowed our first vacant lot this year on March 31st, and our budget expired on August 24th, so we mowed our last vacant lot on August 24th. We mowed 2,907 different lots. Each one of those were mowed between 1 and 5 times for a total of 7,385 mowings. So we mowed a lot, and that expired our budget. It's September 20th today. We're not done mowing. Grass is still growing. The rain that we had last week is causing everything to bloom. So we have some options going forward. Option A is to fully fund mowing all of the 2,907 lots one more time. Option B would be to fund the high priority ones, the ones that are more in the front, the ones that you guys get the calls on. And then, of course, option C is to do nothing.
Commissioner Bilbrook.
I move option A because I don't think anybody is less important when it comes to one of those lots, especially if it's next to your house. And yes, I have had some calls already and seen some, so thank you for that.
So my question is, you expended your budget for mowing vacant lots on August 24th. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So how much does option 1 cost?
Option 1 is around 96,000.
And how do we pay for that?
Well, we would have to go back through and find some funds and do a budget revision to make
Okay.
that happen. Any of the options we would be talking about at this point, it would require a budget revision.
All right, so option 1 costs $96,000, and do you have an estimate for option 2?
Anywhere between 20 and 40,000.
All right. And we would be looking at our budgets to identify where we would find anywhere from $20,000 to $96,000.
If I might interrupt for just a minute, Commissioner. Jeremy's sold himself a little short here. His crews are still mowing lots on a basis that is an emergency only. He has other contractors that are mowing medians and cemeteries, and there's quite a bit of mowing still going on by Parks and Street crews. Parks will be working overtime most of this week trying to catch up, and Streets will be working overtime also trying to catch up on the right-of-ways. Please consider approving this, because this is a big move toward what we've all been talking about. And Melissa's here, and she's got the SOAR program going with her and Joe and Gordon. And this is part of that whole deal where we get into the neighborhoods and get everything cleaned up.
I agree, I understand, and I appreciate that. Are there comments or questions from the commissioners? If not, I'd like to hear from, let me have Commissioner Johnson and then Melissa.
I'll be quick. If we can find the 96,000, let's get them cut.
Just wanted to remind the commissioners here tonight that we do have more money allotted next year. So hopefully, maybe we'll be blessed by the weather gods in a different fashion related to rainfall next year. But we do have more money next year in the budget that was identified during the budget season that Commission approved related to SOAR. So that should help next year. But yeah, for right now, this is the gap, and maybe next year we won't spend as much, so who knows. But at this point, we're going to have to rely on Kathleen over here to help us solve this problem.
I think we should hope it doesn't snow at all this winter, and then maybe we could transfer the money from the snow over to the mowing. That's
Commissioner,
my plan.
you're brilliant. We like how you think.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to think that I don't love our green grass and our wonderful community that grows things so well. But yeah, mowing then becomes a huge problem. I think I've heard 2 commissioners support the 96,000, the mowing all the lots, I should say. So is there consensus around mowing everything again? I don't believe we need a motion.
No, there was no motion required. This was just an FYI.
But-
Money, yeah, I think so.
Oh, great. Okay, so I believe that you have the support of the standing committee to mow all 2,907 vacant lots again. Thank you.
I was kind of looking at our CFO to see if I was getting any of this. I didn't get anything from her, so.
So you went for it.
She's
All
got
right.
a poker face over there.
Okay, so go get the mowers going.
Great, thank you.
Go forth and mow.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe that is the last item on this agenda, and that concludes this meeting, and we thank you, and we are adjourned. Oops.
Sorry.
My papers were just, I was just.
Meeting of the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You'll have 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone, and please, everyone, speak directly into a microphone for accurate recording purposes. Would the clerk please call roll?
Roll call, Philbrick,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Bynum,
Here.
Markley.
Here.
And we do have communication that came, well,
A blue sheet has been distributed this evening. Item 3, the March of Dimes grant application has been removed at the request of the Health Department, but just because we wanted to make sure we had the same number of items, we're adding item number 5 to set a budget hearing date for the Wyandotte County Library. Next, I'll accept a motion for the approval of our July 25th meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes have been approved. Next, we have our measurable goals. As with the last committee, we received a list last month and were directed to consider sort of generally what those goals, whether those goals are being presented in a way that we like, and if we want other changes before we move into our strategic planning discussion. Do you have anything to add other
No,
than?
these are just specific to this particular committee, so if there's anything specific to this committee that you'd like to see differently than what you have in front of you. But I think your comments from the last meeting are probably still applicable to
Yes,
this
I
meeting.
just ditto what I said last meeting. Does anyone have additional comments?
I do.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can articulate it, but I remember when Aging Services was here talking with us about their goals. And the goal is listed as reduce the number of eligible clients waiting for services through senior care. Well, we will have some movement on that due to the fact that we funded part of the shortfall of the cuts that
From the
were
state.
given to that. I'm gonna have to give this a little bit more thought. I may have to just phone you or email you. I just remember back when they were in front of us, I had a concern about a portion of this, and I can't articulate it right at the minute, so.
In regards to the waiting list and then the funding we did.
It
to
was,
supplement
I
that?
think that might have been a part of it. I'm just gonna have to go back and look at it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. It's always nice Commissioner Bynum gets the brunt of those sorts of items as we kind of cover them both at once. All right, moving right along. We have 4 items under our committee agenda. Item 1 is a discussion of the de-annexation of a portion of Holiday Drive near Lake Quivira. And I will ask our Chief Counsel, Ken Moore, I was searching for him to make opening comments.
Commissioners, this is just basically a brief heads up on an item that we believe is going to move forward. We've been approached by a property under Lake Quivira Inc. It's a private entity who owns 4 different parcels that's currently within the city limits of Kansas City, Kansas. And for various reasons, they would like the city, KCK, to de-annex that property so that it could be annexed into the city of Lake Quivira. These 4 parcels, I mean, the information indicates it's probably a grand total of 80 acres. Right now, most of it's vacant. The total taxes paid on this property total is like $16,000 a year in 2015. So this is kind of, again, a heads up is that we anticipate the process will be that they will file a formal petition with the UG clerk. That'll be set for a public hearing. It could be heard by either the Planning Commission or by the UG Commission acting as the city. And there's various factors that you take into consideration in determining whether this is an appropriate action to be taken by the Commission. If it is actually de-annexed, then the property owners will petition to Lake Quivira, and since they own all the property, is a very streamlined process for them, for Lake Quivira to then annex the property into their city. This is mainly along Holiday Drive. The Public Works Department, supports the concept, at least as it is now. But more information, of course, we'll get after the formal petition's actually filed. One thing is if it does, and you decide this, the commission would decide whether they're going to hear it directly themselves or have the public hearing held before the Planning Commission. If it was held before the Planning Commission, then the matter would come to you like any other planning and zoning matter with the same type of action. You could accept it or not, or change the recommendation with 8 votes.
So this, I will just say, this is in my district, and my understanding is that this discussion happened once previously and just didn't move forward for whatever reason. And my impression is that the idea is that these lots would be developed, potentially earning us more tax dollars on the county side than they are as vacant lots. So I think it's worth our consideration, and obviously more information would be forthcoming upon which we would base that decision.
So the property is congruent with Lake Quivira?
Correct.
And you say it's along Inland Drive?
Yes.
Yeah, basically Holiday
Inland
Drive,
turns
I'm
into
sorry.
Holiday.
And
so.
Holiday.
Drive, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just questioning, just thinking.
Essentially, it would shift our city boundary. Of course, it'll still be in the county, so we get the county portion of the taxes. But it would shift to the Kansas City, Kansas boundary north to exclude these 4 parcels from KCK and add them into Lake Quivira. So it'd still be part of Wyandotte County, and we still get the county benefit, which, if it's developed, obviously could be significant more money than what the city would be losing. Okay.
Other
So
questions?
again, it's at this point in time just for information. Once we'll relay this to them and then have them file the petition, and then we'll address that and set a public hearing for that, and however you want to direct us to.
All right. There's no other discussion. We will move right along. Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
you.
Our next item is also for information only. Our Health Department Director, Terry Breckeisen, is here to present the Health Department Comprehensive Community Health Assessment Project. That's a mouthful, and I think we each should have received a handout as that last presentation was going on. Welcome.
The health department's taking on quite a significant task, and we're excited about it, and we wanted you to know about it because your constituents might be participating in it, might have some questions on it, so we wanted to tell you what in the heck we're going to do and why we're going to do it. Joanna Sabali is here, and she is the coordinator of our health improvement and planning program, and Joanna is spearheading this community project for the health department that involves a lot of community agencies, and it will involve a lot of citizens. So I'll let Joanna tell you what has happened, what's going to happen, and go through a timeline for this project.
Great, welcome. Thank you all. So if you're not familiar already, there's 10 essential services in public health. So monitoring health, diagnosing and investigating, informing, educating and empowering, mobilizing community partnerships, developing policies, enforcing laws, linking to and providing care, assuring a competent public health workforce, evaluating and researching are the 10 essential services. And so a comprehensive community health assessment falls squarely in the first essential service of public health, so monitoring. It's been about 5 years since our last comprehensive community assessment. On your handout, there's a picture of it. It was called Forging Toward a Healthier County. If you'll remember, that was published in 2012, right after the Recommendations for a Better Future document came out in 2011. So what is a community health assessment? A community health assessment provides a strategic planning opportunity for all stakeholders involved in community health improvement to work together to identify priority goals and targets based on resident input. So it's similar to the parks planning process that they're undergoing right now. It involves a review of national and state level data. Also, we know that a lot of assessments happen in Wyandotte County. A lot of research happens related to health. So we've pulled together data from those assessments to share also as part of this process, really looking at anything that anyone has done researching health in the county. It also includes our own data collection process, and I'll share more information about that on the next slide. It also leads to a community health improvement plan that creates a 5-year blueprint for community health improvement and can provide an update to Recommendations for a Better Future that's now 5 years old. It's also a critical component of our health department being able to apply for accreditation through the Public Health Accreditation Board, which provides standards for excellence for all health departments in the nation. It's a voluntary accreditation at this point. So this process will involve a lot of community engagement. Both CHA and CHIP, as they're titled, but the Community Health Assessment and Community Health Improvement Plan, they both are intended to really be community-driven processes. So not, the health department is creating their plan, but the community is creating its plan for community health improvement and really trying to better understand what's going on right now in terms of the status of our county's health. So as you can see, we've pulled in a lot of organizations already. We have a team that's begun to think about implementing this process. We actually have a consultant that's supporting us, and that's KU Work Group out of Lawrence. The Wyandotte Health Foundation, Healthy Communities Wyandotte will be using partnerships and the network from these organizations and the Community Health Council of Wyandotte County, as well as the United Way of Wyandotte County, and have pulled in several other key community partners. We'll be doing a concern survey where residents will have the opportunity to rate their rate health or health-related issues in importance and satisfaction. We'll also be conducting focus groups, and then once we have our preliminary results, we'll be doing listening sessions to vet out those results of, does this data sound right to residents? Our timeline for this is that we'll be collecting all of the data from October to December of this year. So that will include the concern survey, focus groups, and reviewing all the data sets that we're looking at. Then in January, we'll be compiling a preliminary report because we do need to share that back out with stakeholders, which will happen in 4 listening sessions, which we believe will be in February of 2017. And then the goal is to have the entire assessment completed in March. Then from March to December, we'll be conducting a community health improvement plan. And it will be a SMART goal, SMART objectives for the community, include which organizations in the county are willing to sign on to make these goals a reality. And the Wyandotte Health Foundation, the Wyandotte Health Foundation has actually committed $25,000 towards that process. So we're very happy about that. So I'd like to open it up if you all have any questions about this.
Commissioner Bynum?
So, for my purposes, and anyone watching that has an interest in this, we know that our county health ranking has hovered at the bottom of the 105 counties, and we know that Healthy Communities Wyandotte has been broken up into action teams to address the issues that were brought forward by the health ranking, which that ranking used, in my opinion, a lot of socioeconomic factors to determine the health of our community. You've probably heard me ask this before. I'm really trying to wrap my head around when we talk about a community health assessment and a data collection, what kind of data? And then we will move from the assessment into the health improvement plan. And does that in any way intersect with or cross paths with those socioeconomic factors that landed Wyandotte County in 100th place out of 105 counties? Because I know we want to move the needle on that.
Right.
But they are measuring a whole bunch of other stuff when they say that we're in last place. And so how do they work together? How are they the same? And finally, do you think that the health improvement plan is going to help move the needle on the last place ranking? I know that's a lot of questions, but I would hope those things are all woven together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we know that social determinants of health, as we call them in the public health world, do impact health factors and health outcomes within the county. When we look at the national data sets, we'll be looking at similar things that the county health rankings look at, but also we'll look at state level data. But one of the challenges, as you know, with the county health rankings data is that it lags several years behind oftentimes. But some of those are great national data sets, like the behavioral risks surveillance survey. So we will utilize some similar data sets, but also trying to branch out into additional ones, including census data and things that do cover socioeconomic issues. Another thing is that the concern survey will cover concerns that are not just health, but are health related in the sense of, having a job is a health issue. So, we're still working to put together that survey, but that's definitely covered, because for somebody that may be their primary concern. That's right. I'm not healthy because I don't have a job. So we're definitely attempting to look at it through that lens. With regards to if it can move the needle, it's challenging when we have, perhaps one of the biggest things that we could do to improve health is raising the income of Wyandotte County residents. So will we accomplish that in 5 years? I can't say that we will for sure, but we will definitely, the goal is not to also, for example, if this assessment uncovers that a major area for concern is jobs, we're not hoping to co-op work that's being done on that area, but we do want to support work that others are doing with our network as well.
And could you go back one slide
Yes.
to where you show your partners? Because I would think at that point, at that intersection, right where you are, workforce partnership or workforce development, whatever that entity is called these days.
There's two of them.
Okay, it's
So
two
you're
different
called,
things.
it's workforce It's Workforce Partnership, or Kansas Works, that is the state, that's the state entity. And then you have Workforce Development or Solutions through Wyandotte Economic Development.
Okay.
So Greg Kendall from Wyandotte Economic Development, WYDEC is on our planning committee because we are aware of that being a major concern.
Okay. Thank you.
No, currently there's, we're trying to keep it fairly small. There's about, this is just the planning committee, kind of how the logistics run out. In terms of engaging additional stakeholders, that will be done along the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you saw that look. Yes. I don't agree with you in this case, but okey-dokey, you're doing
You know,
it.
you'll just want to make sure that as you engage and do not only the assessment, but the plan.
Yes, absolutely.
That you do include.
Yes, and the planning process is much broader. It will encompass 100 or more stakeholders.
Okay.
Whereas, and the assessment process actually will too. I'm just talking about the people who are helping decide how do we do the outreach, you know,
Okay.
what phone calls are we making,
Okay.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Does that initiate in October, or does that actually initiate in year one? Does that initiate in October or next year
No,
of this year? I mean, 2016 or 2017, I'm sorry.
2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if you go to the last slide, what takes place after December 2017, just in the general sense?
Okay, so after December 2017, we will have our community health assessment and we will have our community health improvement plan. According to accreditation standards, we are required to review and update those annually and check in on progress. Currently, we have an evaluation an evaluation tool that we have called the Community Checkbox, where we do document the progress that we're making on measurable goals on through Healthy Communities Wyandotte and the recommendations for a better future. So we'll be using that type of documentation and saying, you know, here's the progress that we've made on this plan every year. And these documents last, generally the best practices to update these every 5 years.
Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? This item is for information only, so if there are no other comments, we will thank you for your presentation.
Sounds good. You can give me that contact.
I'm going to call you about that and something else, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
It'll be soon.
Item 3 is removed from our agenda by the blue sheet. So that takes us to item number 4, which consists of amendments to the ordinance related to special use permit requirements. I don't see Rob Richardson, but someone is coming to present to us.
Rob, how you changed. You're so much
Welcome.
younger.
And thank you, Commissioners. Patrick Waters, Legal Department. Before I begin, I just wanted to make sure, does everyone have the latest version that I emailed?
You should have received by email today an
I'll-
updated version from
Let me pass
Mr.
that out.
I may have gotten it.
So the Kansas legislature recently made changes to the laws regarding the siting of telecommunication towers and cell phone wireless facilities, as well as the permitting process. And the main takeaway from this is that municipalities must now allow telecommunication towers and wireless facilities in the right-of-way. The other big change to this is that municipalities can no longer require applicants to provide technical data requiring the need for coverage. In the past, we have required applicants to show what's called a propagation map, where they would show where their existing coverage was and where their gaps in coverage were. We would also sometimes require drive test study, where an applicant would actually drive around town and test their signal to show where the strengths were. Well, unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. This law takes away our ability to require that kind of data from applicants. It also requires an expedited review process for what's called small cell facilities. This is kind of the trend where the industry is heading. Instead of the huge towers, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of lower, smaller towers, and kind of, I don't know all the technology behind it, but you can get like 20 small towers that work together and basically have even more power than the huge 100-foot towers that we used to see. So that's kind of where the industry is heading. So even though we do have to allow wireless facilities in our right-of-way now, it is still subject to reasonable public health, safety, and welfare requirements. And we've put some in there. Some of the highlights are we do have height limitations in our right-of-way. We're going to limit it to 50 feet along a thoroughfare, 40 feet along collector streets, and 20 along residential streets. So we won't be seeing applications for huge 150-foot towers and the like, at least in our right-of-way. We are going to still require that they show proof, an engineering statement showing that the tower is structurally sound. I think we'll probably expect to see a lot of requests to co-locate on our existing utility poles, because that's kind of the trend using the smaller towers anyways, and so it probably makes sense for them to want to locate on our utility poles. And if they do that, we just want to make sure that they can prove that the facility, that the weight that they're going to add to the pole isn't that the pole is going to be able to support it. We'll also require them to have meetings with our director of planning and our right-of-way manager. And the final change, this is kind of on a different vein, but since we were updating our telecommunications ordinance, BPU had a request. They've had an issue where we have wireless facilities on various water towers throughout the city, and they'd like to be able to take some of these abandoned water towers down. But if they do that, they'd be breaking the contract with the cell carrier, because as it currently stands, we would not allow a new construction to go up where that tower was. So BPU has requested that we simply add an amendment that would allow them to replace a water tower with a monopole so that they don't have to break those contracts. So again, this is to bring us in compliance with the state law. We're asking for a recommendation to forward to Planning Commission.
First off, a real quick question. So one of the first things I had to deal with was a new tower being put up just north of 78th and Leavenworth Road. That there had previously been a BPU water tower, but it had been taken down. And the people that were across the street were up in arms because they didn't want no stinking tower. Okay, there. Hey, they have their rights too. And we came to an agreement to put up a single tower instead of the big A-shaped, and they were very good. BPU was very good about doing it. But in this, I don't see anything that says that there's any questioning about whether the folks who are right next to that tower have any rights. Is it in here? I didn't see it.
Absolutely. Notice is provided to all surrounding neighbors, the property owners, just like you would have in a typical zoning case. So
Okay.
those residents would have the right to comment.
I just wanted to make doggone sure that my residents understood that, because I've been chewed on before on this. And,
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have, because especially if it's going to be allowed in the right of way, and you've got a 40-foot tower and your house is 20 foot away.
Right, and we would still have the right to deny those if we felt like the fall zone would create some type of health or safety problem in the community. So
Okay.
it doesn't mean that they have the right to put up anything they want, but they do have the right to make an application.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Other questions? All right.
And
We
if I
do
could just
need-
submit a copy of the revised version for the record with the clerks.
Great.
I move that we accept.
Second.
Great, roll call on that motion.
Roll call, Philbert,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Our final item was added to tonight's agenda as a result of the blue sheet. It's a notice of budget hearing for the Wyandotte County Library, and Kathleen is going to tell us about why we're seeing this tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for taking this item. We've added it to the agenda for your committee because we would like to have this move forward for the next commission meeting. In developing the budget in late June, at the time that we needed to publicize or publish the budget forms, is what the state budget forms. We put together the state budget forms based upon how we typically do, but because I'm a new CFO, I wasn't aware that typically in the past there was a practice to add on to the state budget form at the bottom the line item for the library fund. And so that publication went forward without the library fund on it. So even though the commission has approved or adopted the budget for the library fund for fiscal year 2017, it wasn't properly published. So what we need to do is go back and properly publish the state budget form, and then readopt the commission needs to readopt the library fund budget. So it's kind of a formality. We want to be in compliance with the state budget law. So that's what this item is.
Okay, so there's been a clerical error, and what we need tonight is a motion and a second so that we can host the public hearing to bring us into compliance. Roll call.
Roll call, Philbert,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. And that does conclude our meeting for the evening. Thank you all for your attendance.
I just want to say you guys are really good at matching.
You were. Did you notice? I noticed that too.
I feel left out. I couldn't say.
You're nice.
These two had it. I did not.
Joe did, yeah.
Now, why can't we do that when we have our little commission?